Welcome to Forum 360 with its global outlook and local view. I'm Ardith Keck, your host today. What does a food bank do? Do they keep people from starving? Here to answer those questions and more is the president and CEO of the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank, Dan Flowers. He's been CEO since 2003 and is responsible for tremendous growth of the food bank. So let's learn more of what a food bank does. Dan, what does a food bank do?
Well, thanks for having me, Ardith. It's great to see you again and to be here on Forum 360 and to answer questions about the food bank, which means the world to me. This work, this mission, it's been my life's work. For 20 years, I've been CEO of the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank, and I love to talk about it. But you know, my experience with food banking goes back even further than that. When I was in my mid-20s searching for a career, I got hired as a grant writer at the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan in Flint. It was funny, I was a guitar teacher all through college. And my wife and I, when we first got married, she was like, you should think about like an actual career. And I was like, well, I like to teach guitar. I love this. I'm happy doing this. I'm not even sure, honey, what else I could do. I had a bachelor's degree. And I thought, well, maybe I can put it to work. I was aware of grant writing, that you know, grant writing was a thing.
That's an important part.
Yeah, it's an important thing. And so I saw an ad in the Flint Journal, and I went down and I applied. Well, I applied, but it was to just a post office box. I didn't even know it was to a food bank. And I got a call from the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan about a job interview, and I was like, food bank? What even is that? Well, I went down, I had a good interview, and they hired me as a grant writer. You know, I didn't know it at the time, how so many circumstances in my life and my upbringing had aligned my heart to this work in ways that I wasn't aware of. You know, my mom grew up in extreme poverty. My dad came out of extreme poverty. I have family members, a lot of family members with substance abuse and mental health issues and struggle with deep poverty, even today. And so when I got the opportunity to start working at that food bank, although I didn't know anything about the work at the time, I very soon discovered a deep heart for the work. And I've spent my career doing it. And so that's kind of like what brought me to it. And now that I've been doing it for 25 years, I've kind of turned into a historian about the work myself. You know, I've been around long enough so I know I'm oftentimes the person, in fact, I'm the person with the most tenure at the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank.
I would imagine,
yeah. When I started, there was 19 of us, and we've almost got 100 employees now, and I've got more tenure than any of them. So I do find myself now turning into a bit of a historian at times. You know, but food banking started in the late 60s in Phoenix, Arizona. A retired school teacher was volunteering at a soup kitchen, the St. Mary's Soup Kitchen. And he overheard a couple people that were there talking about a food company nearby that was throwing food away, and it was still good, and they were taking it out of the dumpster. And so he got the idea, well, let me go down and talk to this company and see if they'll give the food to me, and I'll just bring it down here to the soup kitchen, and we can, you know, distribute it here before it goes bad.
That's how it got started.
That's how it got started, yeah.
Wow.
And it was a retiree, and that'll preach too, Ardith, because the largest hunger relief organization in the world, the largest nonprofit organization in the United States, Feeding America, the National Food Bank Network, was founded by a retiree who he'd had his whole career, and he saw a moment of opportunity that met with him and his passion at that time. And he formed the first food bank. After this food company started donating food to them, he eventually started going to other companies and saying, hey, you know, why don't you donate food? He started collecting so much food that he couldn't store it all at the soup kitchen. So he got a warehouse. And the charities in town all pitched in so that they could cover the cost of this warehouse. And before you know it, the first food bank in the country was born. If you put firstfoodbank.org in a search engine, it will take you to the St. Mary's Food Bank in Phoenix, Arizona, that was started by John Van Hengel. Yep, in 1967. So that's how it started. There's 200 food banks across the country now. The Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank is one of the 200 Feeding America member food banks in the country. That's how we started. And now they have incredible scale today. And I mean, I could go on. I don't want to take up too much time on that one answer, but that's a little bit of the background.
What is the mission of the food bank?
Well, you know, our mission is simple. It's it's feed people, fight hunger. You know, but if I was to say it probably as succinctly as I could, in other words, it would be to rescue grocery industry surpluses, distribute them to people in need, and create opportunities for a better community.
Yeah.
The core operating model at our food bank and every food bank in the country is to take advantage of grocery industry surpluses and distribute those surpluses through a network of charities. Our food bank has 600 homeless shelters, church food pantries, other charities across 8 counties of Northeast Ohio that get their food from us. And so we're the primary supplier of food for them. And we get most of that food from manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors that donate it to us.
Okay, that was my next question. Where does the food come from?
Sure.
It comes from grocery stores that maybe the non-perfect food or extra food? What is it?
Sure. Well, in the early days, it was mostly all from manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors, you know. That was the primary source of food. As food banks have grown, however, now, we get a lot of food from the USDA. You know, about 25% of our food comes directly from the USDA. 10-15% comes from the state of Ohio. You see, once the scale of food banks started to increase, people started to realize these charities that are operated almost exclusively by volunteers, they don't have hardly any paid staff, these 600 church food pantries in our network, well, they reach a lot of people. You know, we'll reach over 1 million people a year in just our food bank alone. The nation's food bank network reaches almost every person in poverty in the country. And so when this infrastructure was built, we started seeing opportunities to collect other resources. It just is very efficient. The USDA, for a long time, under the Farm Bill, has been funding agricultural product clearance programs. So, you know, if you've got a commodity that's in surplus production, you can clear that commodity through manufacturers and distribute that food to food banks. It's very efficient. You can get it right out into the streets to people in need, and that's a lot of the food that we get today. Do you remember like the government cheese program in the 80s? Do you remember hearing about that? Yeah. Well, that was a USDA commodity program. Dairy was in surplus. So the USDA, in order to maintain prices in that market and to keep farmers in business, bought the surplus up. And when they purchased the surplus through manufacturers, they gave that food away to people in need. And so that was kind of the early origins of the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which is, you know, about 25% of our food today.
And you serve how many people? You serve counties, a bunch of counties?
Well, our primary customers, again, are charities, soup kitchens, and homeless shelters.
Oh, okay.
So if you come down to the food bank any day of the week, you're going to see, you know, cars and trucks and vans that are owned by people that attend churches that have food pantries in the basement. And they hand that food away out on Wednesday nights.
So only Summit County or other?
Oh, no. We service Medina, Summit, Portage, Wayne, Stark, Tuscarawas, Carroll, and Holmes counties.
Wow.
So almost every charity in 8 counties is getting their food from us. And, you know, so individuals, volunteers come to our warehouse. We have a food list that we publish on our website. And people will go to our website and they'll place their food orders. And they'll come to our Akron warehouse or the new food bank that we built in Canton, and I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And pick up their food orders, take them back to their site, and give the food away to people in need. Now, a lot of these are small pantries that operate on, you know, Wednesday night, like I said, after church or, you know, Fridays or whatever, of all faiths, and I think that's something very interesting as well I'd love to talk about with you. That's the typical distribution pattern that we have.
Okay. And where are you located?
Well, we operate out of the old House of La Rose building at 350 Opportunity Parkway in Akron. And in 2015, in our strategic plan that we called Food Bank 2020, we developed a vision for the creation of a food bank in Canton. We engaged in a capital campaign that started really in earnest in 2019. And we raised over $14 million. And we built, which is still today, the newest food bank in America, a 40,000 square foot food bank in downtown Canton on Cherry Avenue.
Already built?
It's built, it's open. Yep, we cut the ribbon on July 1st of 2021. And so we have a brand new food bank I'd love to take you through sometime, or anybody that's watching, if you want to have a tour of the food bank at any time, you can come visit our Akron warehouse or this beautiful new Canton building at any time. We'll show you around. You can see. You know, we've kind of gotten into the direct service business a little bit too. You know, I was just talking about how, you know, most of the pantries that get food from us, we're their primary supplier. They take that food to their, you know, site and they give it away. And that had always been who we were, and pretty much who every food bank was. That's kind of how food banks operated, as almost like, you'd think of it almost like a wholesaler. But during the pandemic, we started picking up a lot of direct service programs. I mean, there was such an immediate need. And we responded by doing a food giveaway in our parking lot every other week. The National Guard came to the food bank, you know, in March of 2020, and we started feeding thousands of people in our parking lot. And we're still doing these big distributions. There's been some big increases in the last year or so with inflation. So we're not out of the woods from the pandemic. And then in our new building in Canton, we opened up a food pantry where we're serving people directly at that site as well. So we've gotten a little bit more into direct service as a result of that, and with some of the other cool programming we've done since the pandemic. So there's a little bit about our building and a little bit about the pandemic, and I could talk about that forever.
You mentioned, but how long has the food bank in Akron-Canton, Akron, been in existence?
It was founded in 1982. So the gentleman I mentioned earlier, John Van Hengel, when he started the first food bank in the 60s, word started getting out about this concept, this food bank concept. So we started traveling the country and visiting communities that were interested in the idea, and local communities started forming food banks. And, you know, but back in those days, there was no like designated service areas. So you could have a food bank in one town next to a food bank in another town, and one would go to call on a food donor, and they'd see the neighboring food bank in the lobby on their way out, you know, just asking for donations. And so they created distinct service areas for all of the nation's food banks. So I mentioned our 8-county service area. There's a Cleveland food bank. They have a designated 5-county service area. There's 12 food banks in Ohio, each operating in their own designated service area. It just makes it a little bit easier for food and funds drives and things.
And I imagine that covers the entire state.
Yes, and the whole state and the whole country. So it's a very comprehensive network, and for the first time ever in 2022, Forbes magazine named Feeding America, which is the national network of food banks, the nation's largest charity, bigger than the United Way, bigger than Goodwill, bigger than the Red Cross. So these food banks have scale now. And that scale enables them to do all kinds of other unique things. I'll give you an example. At our food pantry in Canton, you know, we're supplying that out of our warehouse. But we've made partnerships with other programs like Community Legal Aid and Altman Health Center, where we can help people resolve legal matters, where we can help people sign up for benefits, to get vaccinations when they come to get their food boxes. Because people have to eat, and they need food to survive. But what we've learned is that you can do more than just provide food. We know that a compassionate word, affirmation, and love when you come to get food can go tremendously far in people's lives. Mm-hmm. People that come to get food experience high rates of depression and anxiety. Being in poverty is difficult. So a lot of the relationship stuff we've learned over the years, we've focused on making the experience of asking for help redemptive in and of itself. But while you're there, is it possible that we can connect you with pregnancy services or services for raising a child? And we do that stuff all the time. And so oftentimes, coming to get help is the beginning of getting big life issues unraveled and helping people towards self-sufficiency, which I love.
That is so cool, because people need that. They need the food, but they also need the services. And you're providing things.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think food banking is a beautiful concept. It's smart, it's economic, it's economical, it's a great value for the community, it's a great way to practice philanthropy, which we were having a staff meeting this morning, and we were talking about philanthropy. And I never knew this. I mean, I knew philo, like the Greek origins of the word philo was love. But philanthropy means in Greek a love for humanity. Which is kind of interesting. I mean, we think about philanthropy as giving money, being a philanthropist. But really, philanthropy is a love for humanity, which is all over our food bank.
I'm talking today with Dan Flowers, who is the president and CEO of the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank. And it's fascinating what they have done and what they are doing. In order to do what you do, you need volunteers.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the things that volunteers do.
Well, you know, traditionally volunteers would come in and help us sort food, dry food. You know, we have a big section of our warehouse and we always get food, dry food, and food from grocery stores that's been, you know, maybe cans that are dented, you know, boxes that need to be taped up, you know, the packages need to be inspected. But during the pandemic, we had another big phase shift at the food bank. You know, we haven't really been in the food box making business, you know. We distribute most of our food in loose cases, you know, on pallets. But because of social distancing, we started making food boxes. And because so many people needed to stay at their houses during the pandemic, we formed a partnership with DoorDash. And we distributed over 1,000 food boxes to people's houses using DoorDash in 2020 alone. Since we started that program in 2020, we've delivered over 50,000 food boxes directly to people's houses at no charge to them. Those food boxes are packed in our warehouse by volunteers who give their time for that, and DoorDash takes them to people's houses for free. And so we've made a huge impact, and that's a volunteer-driven project. We have volunteers that drive our trucks around. We visit every single Starbucks in our 8 counties every single night in the middle of the night with a volunteer driver. And we go in there, they give us, you know, access codes, and we take all of their pastry items that they couldn't sell back to the food bank, and we give them away the next day. And that's just an example. We have a volunteer dentist who I love, who comes in just to fold thank you notes every Wednesday, and I love the guy. There's a lot of ways to get involved. If you visit our website, Akron-Canton-Foodbank.org, you can sign up to volunteer, and you can make a donation at our website, Akron-Canton-Foodbank.org, and you can find out how to get help if you or someone you know needs help with food. Okay.
So you always need funds.
Absolutely,
You use funds to purchase some things.
We don't purchase much food, but we definitely have to purchase gas at a much higher price than we did to run our trucks. We have 7 semis. You know, we have staff members, almost 100 staff members we have to employ. We have a lot of food safety regulations we have to comply with. So, you know, there is obviously operational needs that are required. The thing is that because there's so much food given to us and it has such a significant value, every dollar you provide to the food bank provides 4 meals to people in need. It's a wonderful, wonderful return on investment. There's so much good happening down at the food bank. You know, you mentioned volunteerism. A lot of people are lonely. A lot of folks during the pandemic spent a lot of time alone. A lot of retirees struggle to find connections and purpose in the world. Life is hard.
And if you have the capability of helping somebody else, come to the food bank.
Come down and volunteer, and you may find new friends that you didn't have before. If you need a hug, you can get a hug at the food bank. We want to be your friend. We want to create a place for you to connect with the world. Obviously, your work means the world to us, but we want it to be really meaningful at the heart level for you.
What is Harvest for Hunger?
Great question. Yeah, I ask a lot of times when I'm talking to groups, like, who's heard of the Akron-Canton Food Bank? And some people will raise their hands, and I ask them, who's heard of Harvest for Hunger? And sometimes more people raise their hand. Harvest for Hunger is a campaign of the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank, the Cleveland Food Bank, the Lorain Food Bank, and the Youngstown Food Bank. 4 food banks come together, and every year we run Harvest for Hunger across 19 counties in Northeast Ohio. It's our biggest food and funds drive every year. And
is it getting food or is it giving food?
It's a food and funds drive. So we are out raising money to support our food banks, and we are raising food. So the easiest way to get involved with Harvest for Hunger, when you go through the grocery store and the cashier says, would you like to scan $1 for Harvest for Hunger? That comes to us. And that's what makes food free at the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank to charities. And so that's the easiest way to get involved with Harvest for Hunger. But a lot of companies will do like Harvest for Hunger campaigns where they'll have dress down days and they'll give the money staff pay to wear jeans to the food bank. You know, they'll do food drives, and it all takes place during the months of March and April every year. It's the Harvest for Hunger campaign, and it supports your local food bank. So that's what Harvest for Hunger is.
Okay.
It just started. We just kicked it off last week at the John S. Knight Center.
Worthwhile.
It's a great campaign.
Yeah. In your newsletter, you mentioned that 2022 was exceedingly hard. Why?
It was the most difficult year of my career.
Why?
Hands down. Well, you know, I think all organizations, even though they may have a lot of volunteers, you know, the staff is so important to the stability of an organization, and we're just not used to turnover. Our staff members come and they stay, and we love them. But we had more staff members depart last year than we've ever had. I think the Great Resignation was a big part of that.
Why?
I don't know anybody who runs an organization that didn't have more turnover in the last 2 years than they've ever had before. So last year was that year for us. So.
Because people were ill?
Well, we had one of our employees take a job working from home for a nonprofit based in Wisconsin. So certainly work from home changed the labor force.
Yeah.
A lot of opportunities opened up at different organizations around the community. So we had some developing professionals that saw opportunities to advance, and so they left. And you know, we had some to retire just because I think the pandemic burned them out so bad. And so it made for more change. That created a layer of difficulty. But what made it even harder, though, was the breakdown in the supply chain that led to the most difficult environment to ever find food donations that I've ever seen. So on top of having some challenges internally with staffing, the whole model of food banking was threatened a lot last year. It was just a difficult year to find food. There was times, we'll typically have a 4 to 5 page food list available on our website, the site that your church or synagogue you can go to, and you can, you know, place a food order and choose from quite a few items. But there were a lot of times our food list was only 2 pages long in 2022. So we were scrambling for food, we were scrambling for people, we were scrambling for donations, and it was tough. Thank the Lord we had a nice little comeback in the fourth quarter, though, and we haven't had a single person leave the food bank in 4 months. So I'm very excited about some stability with the staff. But we also had a good inventory run. Our distribution is up. We were just looking at it this morning. I think we've distributed 1.7, 1.8 million more pounds of food in the first 2 months of this year than last. We're up over 30% in the number of people that are coming to food pantries over last year. You remember, it was about March of last year when inflation jumped up, gas prices started to surge. Well, all last year we had big increases in the lines at food pantries, more and more people coming in and asking for food. And we're up 30% over the first 2 months of 2022. So I think 2023 is going to be a wild ride. So hopefully our food donors will stay with us, our financial donors will stay with us, because and there's a big cut in food stamps. Have you heard about the SNAP reduction?
Yeah.
So that's going down right now in the month of March.
Yeah.
So I would.
People are going to hurt.
A lot of people. So I wouldn't expect the lines at food pantries to get any shorter in the next month or so. So we're bracing for that. So we've got our work cut out for us.
Can people request certain foods?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, this was kind of a revolution in food banking. When it first started, people were making these pre-assembled bags. So if you came down to visit a food pantry, they'd give you a bag of groceries. But who knew if you had, nutritional issues, allergies, or just preference. If you don't like something, you're not always going to use it. So we started, encouraging all of our charities to set it up like a shop through store and let people just pick, So what the standard is now, you go in and if you have a family of 4, you might see on the shelf like limit 3 for a family of 4, limit 5 for a family of 7 or whatever. And then now we have this new app, which is really cool, called Order Ahead. We were one of 2 food banks, the first 2 food banks in the country to pilot Order Ahead. I mentioned our food box delivery program earlier. Now you can go to our website, you can place an order and pick what you want in your food box. And then our volunteers will assemble a custom-made food box for you, and then we'll give it to you for free using DoorDash.
And you have a program partnering with hospitals.
We just did that in 2022 as well.
Tell us about that.
Well, we know that there's a lot of correlations between, proper nutrition and proper health. And so for a long time, we've been wanting to put pantries in hospitals, and we got some funding through Amelia Sykes when she was in the State House, the Ohio Department of Health. And so we launched them last year. So doctors now, when they screen for food insecurity during visits at Akron Children's Hospital, Summa Health Systems, and the Cleveland Clinic, Akron General, can ask a family, if they have enough food to eat, and then write them a prescription to visit the pantry at the hospital. They can get food that day. We're providing all that food at no cost.
Right at the hospital.
Yeah, and the food bank, Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank, is providing all that food.
Do volunteers do that? Do they man or person the food bank, or
At the hospitals?
Yeah. Or the hospital does it?
They may. I mean, I've only worked with like the hospital staff member that helps set up the program, but I wouldn't be. I mean, hospitals are huge volunteer users, you know. So
Cool.
probably.
What happened during the pandemic as far as the food pantry? You got overwhelmed with food?
Well, look, I mean, the first thing that happened was the National Guard showed up, which was really interesting. We had 41 members of the Ohio National Guard with us from March of 2020 until July of 2021. So that was really something. What an experience. I mean, you know, looking back on, if you think back to where you were in March of 2020, so much unknown, so much fear, you know. I think everyone was in some ways scared for their own health and safety, you know. But man, we stood out on those parking lots, so many parking lots with those National Guard soldiers, and served long lines of cars in the beginning of the pandemic.
Dan, thank you for what you do every day, and thank you for coming on Forum 360. This is Ardith Keck for Forum 360 with its global outlook and local view.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.